It's not till someone stops you in a supermarket and tells you that they either hated it or liked it that you necessarily know that people have even seen it.
And you're staring at yourselves and you can't look away, and it's the scariest thing in the world.
You can only ever be, if you're lucky, 65%.
But at the same time, we are kids, and kids are always making believe.
Why are we talking about women like they're aliens?
Hollywood is a place that buys a kiss for $1,000 and your soul for 50 cents.
Helen, I thought I would start by asking you a question. When you're playing a person who is a real person you can meet, as you do in Woman in Gold, were you able to get to know her through video or...?
A little bit, you know, there's always a bit of video, but it was the reading and the research on that level that was actually more valuable than the actual kind of watching of her. The impersonation side of playing a real character and then the storytelling side of playing a real character are kind of two different things. I knew I didn't look anything like her. I knew I'd never... That's a problem with playing a real-life character, is you can only ever be, if you're lucky, 65% of what they are, because they are 100%, they are perfect, and you'll never be remotely perfect as them.
And if you play someone who's well-known, it's even worse. Like, say, playing Katharine Hepburn, I had to say to myself, I'm going to disappoint millions of people, but Martin Scorsese has asked me to do this, so I'm going to give it my best shot. And then you try and pepper all of those things that are kind of inconsequential and almost invisible for an audience. Like, you know, it's the kind of that comes under the subheading of what the character eats for breakfast. It's type of detail that the audience will never consciously be aware of, but it just keeps, because it takes a long time to shoot a film. And anything, I think, that you can throw at yourself to keep yourself surprised and engaged.
I think if you really love the project, you make it happen, in a sense of being able to just give ourselves over to something that is not real, but we can make it for when we're actually doing it real. And we can actually believe that it is real, and why not? I mean, we know it's not real, but at the same time, we are kids. And kids are always making believe. You remember when we were all kids? Let's make believe that this is, and off we go for a game, and we're making believe.
And you truly do
this,
believe
and you
it.
truly believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I think, you know, this fibre, I think, is in all of us, making films.
But that's what Saoirse was talking about before. You know, it's the difficulty when, you know, and you were so exquisite in Brooklyn. It was absolutely heartbreaking. But that difficulty of returning to a place that you know inside out and playing a role that is really enmeshed with your own identity, and it's a challenge in that.
The director put it in such a great way. He said, yeah, it was scary for you because there was nowhere to hide, you know? It was the first time I felt like, Jesus, it took so much out of me, you know? Because your face, and it's like there's a mirror right there.
Yeah.
And you're staring at yourself and you can't look away, and it's the scariest thing in the world.
I had the same thing with Room, where I remembered when I moved from Los Angeles at 7 years old. It was me and my mom and my little sister. We moved into a studio apartment in Los Angeles where it was not much bigger than Room in the movie. The bed came out of the wall. We had no money. We were living off of instant noodles. And yet, she created this world for me and my sister that was so rich, so full of imagination. And it gave me chills when I realized that I was gonna have the opportunity in a month from now to relive my childhood from my mother's perspective.
In both of those films, they seem so particular that there's so much themselves. They're not made from any formula or any cookie cutter thing. But they're so unique that they somehow have the ability to tap into a universal experience. I mean, and that's what makes the performances extraordinary, but also the films really rich, is that there's not only can you connect with them, but audiences, you know, have that.
It's not just like, you don't have to have necessarily come from one place, like immigrated somewhere to relate to it. It is just like the
or
general.
Have been locked up
or locked in a room for
way.
7 years, right?
Lily, I'm interested. in how in Grandma, which is a movie where you are wearing your own clothes and you're driving your own car.
Right, that was budgetary.
Was it? How do you think about the difference between the character you're playing and the real you?
I'm sort of known for creating these very extreme characters, very different one from the other, and different voices and everything. Not that I didn't approach them as an actor, I did, and I do. But this one movie, I just rolled off my back, you know, and I wondered if, I thought, well, maybe I've tried too hard in the past to be a different person, you know.
Charlotte, Andrew Haigh, your director in 45 years, has said that he liked the idea that both you and your co-star Tom Courtenay, that you brought this iconography to your roles, all the past roles that you've had that audiences would know. How did you feel about that?
Tom and I started almost exactly the same time in the 60s in England as actors. So we lived through the same time. So we had the same experiences through time. We didn't necessarily know each other very well. We sort of met up once or twice, but didn't ever really know each other. But we knew each other because of the journey that we'd had, like other people have. Like, we knew each other like other people would know each other. I knew Tom like other people knew Tom. And so when I actually met him, I knew that I could be in love with this man for 45 years. Why not? He's adorable, he's lovely, and he's sort of born around the same time as I am. It just happens that we didn't meet, so I didn't, but I could do, because I'm an actor. And I could really make people believe that we did live 45 years together, and they seem to believe it, because the film has to be believable in that sense. You have to, when you immediately see this couple, believe that they really are deeply in love people still after 45 years.
Do you have a way that you think about talking with potential directors, knowing whether you're going to connect with them and feel comfortable with them?
And with a director, he needs to be a hero to me. You know, I also like to hero worship people. It's probably the only time I do, actually, is in films. And the people I work with, I love to admire them and to want them to make me as best as I can be, and that we have this great collaboration, that we have a perfect kind of sort of relationship, because it can actually be the perfect relationship if I want it to be.
I believe in the director, too. I believe in his sensibility, and that's enough for me. I think that we'll intersect someplace because we have similar artistic feelings about how something should be presented.
But in a way, I mean, the director puts the food on the table, but it's up to the actors to have the conversation that's going to make the dinner party come off. I mean, they assemble the team. I mean, but they're not, often I think actors get spoken about like we're sort of the puppets from which someone else pulls a string. And I'm always surprised when someone says, so did you have any say in what you wore or, in that scene?
Well, I didn't, so.
It's a dialogue, you know.
I think different directors have different expectations and different demands.
That's why that moment when you say, okay, let's go ahead, it's such an important moment because you are giving that.
It is
control.
a complete, the word is surrender.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have got to surrender.
Yes, and it's interesting living with the director, understanding, which I never understood before, how much the director has to surrender control, because an actor can't or won't do what they want them to do, or it's sunny and he doesn't want it sunny, but he's got to shoot anyway, or everything goes wrong all the time, and they have to surrender. So that's the beauty of film to me.
Because that's when the magic actually comes in, because nobody really can control it.
Nobody can really control it, exactly. And when people try to control it, that's when it goes wrong, in my experience. I mean, Altman was brilliant at surrendering control, Robert Altman. He knew absolutely what he was doing to the nth degree.
It's amazing.
His understanding of the technicality, and then who he cast, and then his ability just midstream change major ideas like that and go with it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I've heard him say to an actor who just started to work with him, they might say, oh, what do you want from this scene, Mr. Altman, or something? He'd say, I don't know, why don't you surprise me?
Yeah, oh, that's the worst. Like, oh, no, I wouldn't know what to do.
But it's not. It's often not. I mean, this is the thing about you. Yes, you surrender, but it's not a passive surrendering.
No.
It's like having great sex. It's like you don't know.
You're right to underline that, actually, Kate.
Leading.
People say, "Oh, yes, well, they just sort of they just do what they're told." It's nothing to do with that.
No, absolutely.
It's a high level of surrender.
I mean, then that's where you have to be a little bit brave. It's like you make an offer, And you go, okay, that was the wrong way to go. But it's not often until you've done it the wrong way that you think, okay, that's not that terrain, it's that terrain.
That would also go back to good director that you feel that you are willing to be in the process of failure and forgiveness.
And you know that they'll pick you up every time and send you on the right path.
That they're not someone that's sitting there looking at the monitor going, oh.
Did he use a monitor? Or was he beside the camera?
No monitor.
Yeah.
That's what Wes Anderson is like as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't have. I mean, he goes to the monitor to kind of see the shot because it's so kind of aesthetic. But then he'll just sit on an apple box and just watch you work.
Oh, God, I don't know where to start with this.
I can't be held responsible for having memorable hair.
There's an issue with directors in Hollywood, which is that only about 4% of studio movies are directed by women. Helen, is there a role for actresses in the conversation about women directors?
Oh, God, I don't know where to start with this. On the one hand, I think it should just be how brilliant, how talented you are, what, you know, but then you can't get to be talented if you're not given an opportunity to work, you know, and especially in filmmaking. If you're never given the experience of making a film, how can you get to be a great filmmaker?
That it's not about the money, it's actually about just having a level playing field.
In almost every interview now, I get asked the question of, wow, you know, women starring in movies, they're making money. You think this is a trend that's here to stay? And I'm like, first of all, why are we talking about women like they're aliens? Like, we're talking about them like it's a niche genre. It's like, we're talking about half of human beings.
I think one of the reasons I do like living in France is for that reason, because I just feel so valued there. Not because I'm a movie star, but they just value women in a way that perhaps other countries don't.
I think having a conversation about it is at least the beginning of it. I mean, women have had to come a long way.
We should all work towards getting great roles for women in real life, because as night follows day, the roles follow in drama.
Within film, and so many, especially big budget blockbuster films, it's almost like we've been tricked into thinking, oh, well, we've got our leading ladies and, you know, we've all led films before and so we're fine, so we're on the right path. But we've been tricked into it because everyone around us usually is a man. And I think what needs to change is having more films that consist of female interaction. Anything to have interaction between women and let them see that that's normal and it's okay and it's interesting. It can be very interesting and entertaining. It's really important that the young people see that.
There's a universality, it's a human experience. You know, Hamlet is one of the great plays and I feel it speaks directly to me. And yes, it's a male protagonist, but it's got an everyman quality to it and that women can speak to all of humanity.
If the best that we can give someone, if they can't travel or if they can't leave their small town, is paying for a movie ticket, how are we seeing women? How are we seeing men? How are we showing conversations? How are we showing the times right now? It's how do we show mistakes and how we rectify them? How do we show family? How do we show the complication of the human experience?
Culture does lead the change in a way. It's the stories that we tell ourselves, you know, that do start to shift our thinking.
Lily, what do you see the relationship being between social currents and kind of the message of the work that you're putting out? Like, do you like the idea that your work that you do has kind of a progressive undercurrent?
The intention of it has politics, not politics in some traditional sense, but has the sensibility expresses progressive ideas. Yeah, I do.
It's a provocation. You know, your work is so provocative.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I
But
love hearing that from you.
Yeah.
Did you think of Carol at all as a provocation?
I think if the film had been made 10, 15 years ago, I think it would have been viewed through, even if it had been made the same frame by frame, it would have been viewed through a much more political prism. I think it's timely. But if you think about all the transgender, same-sex relationship films that have come out in the last few years, it's in the zeitgeist. You
There
know,
is a time when it
yeah.
will be accepted. It's like bruise and bruise and bruise and bruise, and then bing, it's there. It goes into this sort of mass consciousness.
You know, and you can guide an audience, but you can't make them have the conversation. You can't tell them what to think about it. And that's what I find really exciting about acting, is that it's And what I find tricky about being in film, it's not till someone stops you in a supermarket and tells you that they either hated it or liked it, that you necessarily know that people have even seen it.
Comedy, I find that the hardest. You're doing comedy and it's just silence.
By the third take.
And you're just dying inside going like, there's no way that this is working.
It's okay,
not
Trainwreck
until...
was hilarious.
Well, I was having panic attacks the entire time.
But comedy in general is, I think it's harder than drama.
They
The
say
timing that you...
I don't altogether believe that, because it's very hard to do.
Comedy and film, I think,
Well,
is
you
awkward.
know. I mean, tell us, teach us. How do you do it? You see, you do it just sitting there.
I must rely on the director.
Oh, really? That's
in
interesting.
capturing it right, capturing the angle,
Yeah.
the timing, the feel for it.
Exactly, because it can be edited, and then suddenly you think, but that was so funny on set. How could it not be?
What about that? Being nude in a van full of dead meat. That was fairly demeaning.
Hollywood is a place that buys a kiss for $1,000 and your soul for 50 cents.
How do you know when to say no? Whether to a role or to something that's being asked of you?
In terms of the creative conversation, I think it's always better to say maybe or why. Okay, that's a good reason to do that. Let's try it. I think point blank refusal.
No is useless in creation.
Oh, I've said no. I've said no.
You mean no within the making of, or no when it comes to like...
I felt that the writer or the director was demeaning women.
Oh, well, yeah,
That
we
sort
don't
of
have
thing.
that.
You know, I felt it was demeaning or one-dimensional or something like that. That it would get my goat, sort of thing, and I'd say no. Not often, because I agree. It's not, that would be all. But
No, there are
just
some
very
things that
occasionally.
maybe aren't negotiable. Just a few things, just on that level. But other than that, you can actually, by just saying the maybe, the no, you can actually then bring them more into your own camp, and you can start to negotiate.
Would this be something like the director, just the way he spun something? You wouldn't have anticipated it?
Well,
or...
you know what? There was a scene in Long Good Friday, a long time ago. He wanted her to lay out his clothes. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's like being a servant. But I have done a lot of very demeaning things as well, incidentally. The people out there, what about that? Being nude in a van full of dead meat. That was fairly demeaning.
Oh, that was extraordinary. That's a deathbed image for me.
You did that? I did.
I did. I said
had
yes
to get
that
very
time.
drunk to do it.
I really like the idea.
But the next time I was
asked, I said no.
I said no.
Well, you know, it was art.
Marilyn Monroe, the great quote of Marilyn Monroe's is, Hollywood is a place that buys a kiss for $1,000 and your soul for 50 cents. And she said, I turned down the first offer.
Yeah, I turned down the first offer.
It's about perspective, isn't it? I mean, the camera is a gaze. And I remember there was this shot in Olive Kitteridge of Fran McDormand's bottom, and her husband was looking at her that had a really strained relationship, and she was leaving the room, and just this close-ups of her bottom, and I thought, well, if Michael Bay shot that, it would be an entirely different perspective. But then they had sex for the first time probably in about 20 years, and so it was suddenly through her husband, it was a really subjective shot that propelled in one instant a whole kind of shift in their relationship. And so it was a really important shot. So yes, it was of her bottom, but it had value.
The context.
You know.
If it's creative and you know that, again, there's a reason for it, then fine. There are some times when you know that their reason isn't creative and it's not going to benefit the story at all, where you do have to say no. And you know.
It does seem like there is more of an expectation of actors to share of their personal lives now, perhaps, than there was then. Saoirse, how do you separate your life on screen from what's private?
I mean, I don't want to share anything from my personal life. I don't think I need to. I think, I started when I was very young, and I know even from the age of 12, the only thing that was important was actually the film, and that was the only thing that I was ever sort of going to talk about. I mean, I think for me it's important to protect my life outside of work.
There's a more insidious thing and it happens to men and to women, which was very different to when I entered the film industry, that now there's a request that you open yourself to social media so that your profile is high, and that you're expected now to brand yourself
what is brand? None of us are here because we branded ourselves. We're here because we've played different characters and people go, wow, how did you get into someone else's mindset?
If I know too much about an actor and I watch them in a film, I'm only thinking of them as a celebrity or who they are personally. You know, I mean, there's people I know, like we've worked together before. I can watch you in something and completely believe in what you do because you keep your personal life personal. That's the whole point. But when you get to know someone on an international stage, how can you then separate your mind as an audience member to really enjoy their work, you know, especially if they're pretending to be someone else?
I'm a firm believer in you don't just turn away from those things. You want to get closer to it. So I thought, well, perhaps I can be part of a group that's maybe pushing it in a different direction where then different types of information then can get to the surface. Because when we're constantly learning about what the Victoria's Secret angels ate before they went on the runway, and it's like, what does what I eat have anything to do with what you want to do with your life?
I find myself utterly boring, and I'm sure everyone else does, and I'm not interested in talking about, you know, what I had for breakfast.
I think you can feel the pressure as well from social media to like present yourself in a certain way. And because of that, you lose touch of what individuality actually means. On things like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, when it's used in the wrong way, your kind of representation of yourself is completely warped.
Well, ladies, we have to surrender you back to the rest of your day. This has been so lovely. Thank you.
Back to my van then.
Yes, there you go.